Beginning Greek students often find it difficult to translate the forms of letters that they see in a printed text into a series of strokes to write on a piece of paper or on a homework assignment. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to write the 24 letters of the classical Greek alphabet. And in doing that, it'll be helpful, I think, if you can imagine this sort of like the kind of paper that they used to teach elementary school students how to draw the alphabet on. A top line and a bottom line and a kind of dotted middle line. In fact, if we look at Greek manuscripts of 1,000 years ago in the 10th century, scribes would sometimes have a guideline drawn for them to orient the letters to make sure their lines are straight. But instead of using a bottom line that the letter sits on, they'll often have a kind of intermediate line that the letters sort of hang off of, if you will. And in this tutorial, this video, I want to focus especially on the lowercase letters, the cursive letters. And many of them, like alpha, will sort of hang off of that middle line. So if you want to keep that in mind as I'm describing this, that might be helpful. The sequence of strokes, if you follow the sequence of strokes that I show you, it will make your handwriting easier for people who are familiar with Greek to read, and you'll get a sort of familiar standard-looking shape to your script. They really haven't changed in 1,000 years very much. If we look at manuscripts, we can tell the sequence of strokes that a scribe used in writing the text, and it's essentially the same sequence that you would be taught if you were learning to write a modern Greek text today. So let's begin from the beginning of the alphabet. Alpha, very simple, just very much like a cursive. A, you can just draw it in that one unbroken sequence. Most of the letters in this cursive lowercase form can be drawn with a single stroke without even having to lift the pen. So beta. Beta is going to go all the way up to the top of the line. It's going to begin a little below the line, make its way all the way up to the top, and then come back to that middle stroke and in that middle guide and in a single stroke all the way around. So let's do that a little more fluently in one stroke. A beta is going to be done in that sequence, bottom to top. Gamma is going to begin at the middle line. It's going to dip just a little below the bottom line and then come back up. So a single motion again can get gamma for you altogether. Delta is going to begin by hanging off that middle line, and then it's going to curve around and go all the way up to the top. So delta in a single stroke will go all the way up and back down. Epsilon's a nice, easy one, mostly for people familiar with the Latin alphabet. It's just tucked in between the middle and the bottom line and just looks a little like a cursive E, or however you want to imagine it. Zeta sometimes gives people trouble, but if you think about the upper level version, that if you're just doing 3 big strokes for a capital zeta, in reality, the normal cursive form is not that different. The first stroke is going to be not so straight. The second stroke is going to be very similar, really. The third stroke is going to continue and curve on below the line, a sort of finishing off touch that we'll see in a couple of other letters, including the terminal form of sigma and including the letter C. So for your cursive zeta, just one stroke, one motion gives you that letter of the alphabet. Let's keep the letters up high and pick up with eta in just a moment. Eta, again, is going to be done with a single stroke. There we go. Beginning at mid-level, back up to mid-level, and then dropping down below the line. Theta, again, thinking of the capital, you might be tempted to write it in 2 separate strokes, and that's fine, that's very legible, but you'll typically see people writing Greek today do this in a single stroke, beginning at the midpoint, down to the bottom and top, and then providing that crossing bar all in one motion. So let's do that a little more fluently. There's a theta. Iota is about as simple as it can get. Just begin at the mid-level, go to the bottom, round off the end of just a little bit, not a straight up and down, and no dots on your eyes, please. It's an iota. Kappa, you could do as 3 separate strokes and keep all between the midline and the bottom of the bottom guideline. But more typically, you'll see people writing cursive in modern Greek do it in a single stroke. So down, up, and then back around will be your kappa. Lambda normally takes 2 strokes. It's not executed as a single stroke. It's one of the few letters where the scribe will lift the pen and then add that second letter. Mu, a little bit similarly, we begin at the midpoint and drop way down, and you may have to lift a little to add the rest of the mu. Make sure that this is nice and round at the end. Then xi sometimes bothers people a little bit when they're getting used to it. Again, think of the capital form of it, and that might be helpful. So in the capital form, we really just got these 3 bars, and they perfectly align with top, middle, and bottom guideline of your text. So we're going to write this now as though we're doing the top bar, middle bar, and bottom bar. And as with zeta and later with sigma, we'll round off the bottom. So in a single stroke C, well, that's not a very good one. I can do better than that. In a single stroke, C is going to look something like this. Omicron, not really much of a challenge other than trying to keep it nice and neat and not look too sloppy. Let's see. Oh, I left out nu. All right. We better go back and add nu before xi. Let's do them in the right alphabetical order. I just wanted to stress that nu, you want to get a nice pointy return on that. You start at the middle and come back up. So mu, nu, xi, omicron. And we'll pick up with p in just as soon as I can wipe the board clean. And again, you'll find that as with some of the other letters like kappa, it's perfectly all right if you want to almost imitate the uppercase form in a small dimension and write it with 3 strokes where the midline, that dotted guideline, is the sort of top of the P. But you'll also see this done frequently in a single stroke and a crossbar added. So P could look like this in a typical kind of cursive writing. Don't let that fool you. That's a normal looking P. Rho just begins at the bottom, goes up to the midbar, and then drops well below it. Sigma has 2 forms in our normal printed version, the medial and the terminal form used at the end of the word, medial used anywhere else, the beginning or the middle of a word. And it begins at the middle and comes across, and we can, well, sorry, I did that backwards. It should begin at the kind of top, and there we go, come across to the middle for the beginning of a word, middle of a word, and then at the end of the word, we don't come back up, and we have that just tail off at the end. Tau, 2 strokes will do the job. And upsilon, keep it nice and round. So contrast the upsilon with the nu, which has a sharply pointed, angled return from the bottom line up to the top. Phi, and like other letters, again, you could imagine it as a kind of version of what you're copying from the uppercase form, but you can also do this in a single stroke like so. So you can come up and go back down all in 1 stroke with the cursive form of phi. He is a letter where you will lift the pen normally. The starting point should be about the middle dotted guideline, and the cross should be about the bottom line. So both legs of the he will drop below the bottom line. Psi, again, another one where you'll more or less imitate the capital form with 2 strokes, just keeping around the middle guideline and then more or less filling the top and dropping a little below the bottom. And finally, omega, the last letter, which in a cursive form can look a little different than you're used to seeing. So omega in the, let's just move over and do a separate omega. In a big capital letter form might look like that. In the cursive form might look more like that. And then that'll be very distinct from the pi. It may look a little similar at first, but the cursive pi has that crossbar. Omega should be nice and clear. So those are 24 cursive letters of the classical Greek alphabet. Become familiar with those, and you'll be able to write in a form that your teacher will be able to read.